Hello and welcome to the My School channel. My name is Angela, and in this video we're going to continue the government topic by topic video lesson. So we're moving on to the topic Nigerian Federalism. Here we're going to discuss the origin and structure of Nigerian Federalism. So we've divided this video lesson into two parts. So in the first part, we're going to discuss the definition, the structure and development of Nigerian federalism, as well as the concept of fiscal federalism and how it was implemented in Nigeria from independence to 1975. So please stay with us, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the My School channel. Like I said earlier, we are moving on to the first part of this video lesson where we'll discuss the origin and development of federalism, as well as the concept of fiscal federalism and how it was implemented in our country from independence to 1975. So let's dive right into it. So here we're going to discuss the recap of the concept of federalism. In a previous video lesson, we discussed the concept of federalism. We're going to do a short recap. Then we're going to discuss the origin of federalism and the reasons for its adoption in Nigeria. Then we're going to discuss the various constitutional conferences that precipitated the establishment of federalism. We're going to talk about the development of federalism in Nigeria. We're also going to discuss revenue allocation in Nigerian federalism. That's the concept of fiscal federalism. Then we'll also discuss inter-ethnic rivalry and the problems of Nigerian federalism. So let's begin with a recap of the concept of federalism. So a federal government is a system of governance in which power is divided between a central or national government and various regional or state or provincial governments. So a federal government is a government where power is divided between various levels of government. This is unlike a unitary system of government where power is concentrated in the hands of the central government, the central authority. Power is not devolved or decentralized to various units. But in a federal system of government, power is decentralized, power is devolved to various units within the federation. Now let's look at the features of a federal government. So one of the features is that it is designed to prevent one single entity from becoming too dominant. Unlike a unitary system where power is concentrated in the hands of the central authority, in a federal system, power is decentralized in order to ensure that not one single authority is dominant within that society. Also, the constitution is supreme. In most unitary systems, it is usually parliament that is supreme in such a society. But in a federal system, the constitution holds supremacy. That means it is the supreme decision-making body in that society. That means any decision that is made by any level of government has to be based on the dictates of the constitution. Anybody who goes outside of the dictates of the constitution will receive full penalties from the constitution according to the dictates of the constitution. So the constitution is supreme in such a system. In Nigeria, the federal, state, and local governments collectively form the federation. This is unlike some other societies where they just have a federal and a provincial government. But here in Nigeria, we have three tiers of government, three levels of government: federal, state, and local governments. The central government handles matters of common importance to the entire federation. That means all of those things that apply to the entire nation as a whole is handled by the federal government. This includes issues such as currency, immigration, defense, and so on. These are handled by the central government. But the state and local government has its own governmental structure, but are subordinate to the federal government. And this state government and local government handle issues that are specific to their jurisdiction, but they are also subordinate to the central government. That means sometimes they receive policy direction from the central government that they have to implement within their states, while they still have that authority to make laws, to implement policies based on the needs of the people within their jurisdiction. Now let's move on to the next slide. Now we're going to discuss how power is divided in a federal state. Power is divided through what is known as the legislative list. So legislative list specifies which level of government has the authority to legislate and govern in particular areas. So there are three legislative lists we have. We have the exclusive, concurrent, and residual list. This list are stipulated in the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So it lists out those subject matter that each of the different levels of government are allowed to make laws on. So the exclusive list is exclusive to the federal government. So it includes matters of defense, currency, immigration, foreign policy, and so on. The state and local governments are not allowed to debate these issues within their legislature. It is meant for the federal government only. Then for the concurrent list, it is for the federal and regional governments. Both of them are allowed to make laws on such subject matters. But the thing is that whenever there is any issue between the federal and the state government, it is the federal law that prevails. The federal law always prevails over the state law. Matters that both the federal and regional governments can legislate upon include education, health, infrastructure, labor relations, and so on. We have the residual list that is restricted to the regional governments only. That means it is only the state and local government that are allowed to legislate on these issues. So they include primary education, markets, motor parks, libraries, and so on. The residual list is not actually stipulated in the Constitution. What is stated in the Constitution is that anything that is not in the exclusive or concurrent list are in the residual list, and it's only the state government that is allowed to make laws on such issues. Now let's move on to the next slide. Now we're going to discuss the origin of federalism in Nigeria. How did this system of federalism come about in our society? We understand that Nigeria originated from the amalgamation of the Northern and Southern Protectorates by Frederick Lord Lugard in 1914. So that is when Nigeria came into being. So at that stage, Nigeria became a unified entity. But there was still the Northern and Southern Protectorates, and they were receiving policy direction from the central governments. So it was not a federal government in any sense. They all received policy direction from the Governor General at that time, which was Frederick Lord Lugard. However, in 1939, there was the first change within the Nigerian structure of governance. So Governor Bernard Budilon divided southern Nigeria into two provinces, the eastern and western provinces. So at that stage, we now had three provinces in Nigeria. So that system of provincialism came into being. So we now had three provinces, the northern province, the western province, and the eastern province. So this division was still primarily administrative. This means that they were still receiving policy direction from the central governments. But we can see how Nigeria was starting to devolve power to various regional units. They were not still allowed to make any decisions without the approval of the Governor General, but power was being devolved to these various regions. Then we had the introduction of regionalism in 1946. So this is when Governor Salter Richard introduced regionalism through the Richards Constitution. So regional legislative and executive councils were created. The councils had no full power. This means that they were not allowed to make laws or implement policies based on the needs of the region. They were still receiving policy direction from the central authority, but they discussed all of these policies within the legislative and executive councils. So the Richards Constitution formally recognized Nigeria's diversity and set the stage for true federalism. But true federalism was still not achieved at this stage. Then for the third stage, we have the creation of the regional assemblies in 1951. The Macpherson Constitution established regional houses of assembly that had the authority to make laws on certain matters. So they were allowed to make laws on issues that are specific to the needs of their regions. So you can see that federalism was beginning to develop in this society, but there was still no true federalism at this stage. Ministries were also introduced at the central and regional levels to handle day-to-day administration. And this gave the regions more autonomy in internal matters. Then in 1954, there was the introduction of what is known as true federalism. The Littleton Constitution firmly established Nigeria as a federation of three regions, the northern, the eastern, and the western regions. The Constitution provided for federal and regional governments with clearly defined powers, and each region had their own constitution, their own civil service, and their own judicial systems. This was a truly federal state. Each of these different regions had a constitution of their own, and they were allowed to make laws and implement policies that were specific to each of these different regions. So this is when true federalism was established in Nigeria. Now let's move on to the next slide. Now we're going to discuss the reason for the adoption of federalism in Nigeria. One of the reasons for the adoption of federalism is cultural diversity. Nigeria is home to over 250 ethnic groups. Islam is dominant in the north and Christianity is dominant in the south. So we can see the ethnic and religious diversity we have in the country. So as a result of this, a federal system was seen as the best way to manage this diversity. In a society that is heterogeneous, a federal system of government is the best system to adopt in order to ensure that the needs of each of these various ethnic groups, the needs of each of these various religious groups are taken care of in such a society. So this is one of the reasons for the adoption of federalism. Now let's move on to another one. And that reason is the British colonial policy. So federalism is a product of indirect rule. When the British administration came to Nigeria, they discovered that we had various traditional rulers for the different regions within the country, the different ethnic groups. And so the British people saw this as a way to indirectly rule the people through their various traditional rulers. And as a result of that, we adopted a federal system. The government was giving policy direction to these various traditional rulers, and so we're not truly unified in a sense as a result of this indirect rule. We're not allowed to come together to develop a unified system of government. So in that sense, the diversity that was in Nigeria before the British came to Nigeria is still present to this day. So the British saw the regions as distinct political and cultural entities and ruled them separately. Now let's move on to another reason. And that reason for the adoption of federalism in Nigeria is the geographical size and population. Nigeria is a large country both in land mass and in population. So federalism was adopted to make governance more manageable by distributing power across the regions. So the country is a very large country by both land mass and by population. We have a very large population in our country. And so because of that, we need to develop a system of government that can adapt to the needs of each of these various regions. If we have just a central government, they will not be able to get into the grassroots of the country. And so they needed to decentralize power to other levels of government so that the revenue within the country, policies can get deep into every part of the country. Now let's move on to another reason for the adoption of federalism in Nigeria. We have the need for effective administration. Federalism allowed for the devolution of power to improve responsiveness to local issues. It ensured that regional governments could design policies tailored to their specific needs. So each of these regions have specific issues that may not ring true to other regions within the country. And as a result of that, you need a government that is sympathetic to the needs of a particular region. So this is the reason for the adoption of federalism in Nigeria. So we have different state governments, different local governments, so that they can adapt to the various needs within that particular region. Now let's move on to another reason. Another reason for the adoption of federalism is bringing government closer to the people. One of the goals of federalism is to make government more accessible and more responsive to the people. Regional and later state governments were able to promote citizen participation in governance. The fact that we have a member of House of Rep representing each of the constituencies within the nation helps to make sure that the needs of the people are attended to at the federal level. So the division of power between the federal, state, and local governments also help to bring the government closer to the people. When you have people who are also representing you at the state level and also at the local government level, you have a lot of people that you can go to whenever there is any need within the society, people who can attend to those needs. So federalism helps to bring the government closer to the grassroots, to the people within the country. Now let's move on to the next one. And that reason for the adoption of federalism is nationalist agitation. So as nationalist movements grew stronger in the 1940s and 1950s, they were increasing demands for self-governance. We talked about this a lot under the topic, the process of decolonization. We talked about how after the Second World War, there was increasing nationalist agitation for self-rule. So this affected the need for the creation of federalism. So ethnic groups and political leaders advocated for more control over their own affairs. Federalism was a compromise solution. These nationalist leaders were actually advocating for the needs of their people, the people within their ethnic group, within their religious groups. And as a result of that, the British saw this as an opportunity to introduce federalism. So it was under the Littleton Constitution, after Sir Oliver Littleton brought up the issue of the ethnic crisis that was going on in the country, that this idea of federalism was introduced into the Constitution. So it was as a result of nationalist agitation within the country. Now let's move on to another reason for the adoption of federalism. And that reason is economic considerations. Federalism allowed each region to develop at its own pace and manage its resources with some autonomy. It also encouraged healthy competition among regions. So we also talked about how in 1951, where Sir Anthony Enahoro raised the motion for independence in the House of Representatives, and as a result of that, the Northerners felt like they were not ready to gain independence at that stage. So they had to introduce federalism so that each of these various regions can grow at its own pace. Since the North was not ready, the East and West were given some form of autonomy in 1957, and then it was not until 1959 that the North was given its own autonomy. So this is how federalism worked at that time. It helped to ensure that each of the regions can grow at their own pace. Then it also encouraged healthy competition among the regions. When each of these regions are administering to their own needs, they can compete among one another. When one region sees that the other one is developing more than their region, they can choose to do better, to raise more revenue within the region and to develop that region. So it helped to encourage healthy competition within the Nigerian society. Now let's move on to the next slide. Now we're going to discuss the structure of Nigerian federalism. So Nigerian federalism is structured in such a way that we have three different arms of government: the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, all duplicated among the three levels of government: the federal, the state, and the local. So as it is in the federal, so it is in the state and the local governments. So for the federal government, the legislature consists of the National Assembly, which is a bicameral legislature. That means it has two legislative houses: the House of Senate, which is the upper house, and the House of Representatives, which is the lower house. Then the executive composes of the president, who is the head of state and government, the vice president, who helps to assist the president in the administration of his duties. Then we also have federal ministers. These federal ministers are the head of the various ministries within the federation. By ministries, we mean ministries such as health, communication, information, and so on. Then we also have heads of federal agencies and parastatals. These are heads of the various agencies and departments within the Nigerian Federal Civil Service. So we're talking about the managing directors, the director generals of these various agencies and parastatals. So it's important to note that when you're talking about the executive, you do not only mean the president, the vice president, and the ministers. You also mean the civil service within the country. So people who are working in the ministry, people who are working in the various departments and agencies in the country are also part of the executive. They are responsible for implementing policies within the society. Then for the federal judiciary, we have different federal courts. We have the Supreme Court, which is the highest court of appeal in the country. And then we also have the Court of Appeal and the Federal High Court. All of these are the federal courts we have in Nigeria. Then remember we talked about how at the state level, there is duplication of functions. This means that as it is at the federal level, so it is at the state level. So the state level has a unicameral system, just the State House of Assembly. But for the executive, you have the governor, who is a representation of the president at the state level. He is the chief executive officer, is the head of state and the government at the state level. This means that he is allowed to make and implement policies for the state, for his own jurisdiction. Then we also have the deputy governor, just like the vice president. We have the state commissioners, who is the leader of the various state ministries in the state civil service. So he's a representative of the federal ministers. So just as we have Minister of Education, we have Commissioner of Education for the states. Then we have heads of state agencies. There are agencies that have been created within the states, and we need managing directors and director generals to head each of these agencies, each of these parastatals within the states. So they are also part of the executive. Then we also have the state civil service that consists of the ministries within the state and the parastatals. Then we have the state judiciary, where we have the state high court and the magistrates courts. They are responsible for handling cases within the states, within their own jurisdiction. Then we have the local level, just as it is in the federal and the state level, so we have at the local level. Here we have elected councillors. They're responsible for making laws, making bylaws within the local governments. So just like they are elected at the National Assembly and the State House of Assembly, they are also elected councillors who make laws within the local governments. Then we have the chairman of the local government council, who is a representative of the president at the federal level and the governor at the state level. So he's responsible for implementing policies within the states. Then there's the vice chairman, who is just like the deputy governor and the vice president. Then we have supervisory councillors, who are responsible for heading the various departments within the state. So they are representative of the commissioners and the ministers at the local level. So they head the various departments, just like the commissioners head the various ministries and the federal ministers head the various federal ministries. Then we have local government civil service that consists of local staff and departments. The departments are just like the ministries. Then we have local courts known as customary courts. They're responsible for handling issues within the local government. Is that the end? Okay. They are responsible for handling issues within the local government. Now let's move on to the next slide. Okay, now we're going to discuss the concept of fiscal federalism. Fiscal federalism is the financial arrangement among the different levels of governments in a federal system. So here we're talking about how money is distributed among the various tiers of governments. Let's move on to the next slide. So when we're talking about fiscal federalism, it is essentially about revenue allocation. So revenue allocation is the process by which revenue collected by the federal government is systematically distributed among the various tiers of government to enable them carry out their constitutional responsibilities. A lot of the revenue that is generated are generated by the federal government, and the federal government have to find a way to distribute these resources among the various states. But the method by which they distribute it has to be determined. They have to know in what proportion each of the states gets the revenue that has been generated. So that's what we talk about, the principles of revenue allocation. So we've come to the end of this segment of the video lesson. I believe it was educative and enlightening. If you would like to continue on this journey with us, please go down to the link in the description below. This takes you to my school website where you can subscribe for the government topic by topic video lesson. There you can continue on this journey with us. So we're going to continue with the principles of revenue allocation, how the revenue generated by the federal government is shared among the various regions within the country. I hope to see you there. I believe you're enjoying this content. Please do not forget to hit the like button, click on the subscribe button, and lastly, tap on the notification bell to get informed as soon as we release the next videos.